This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutastrophe. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe birthday boy. And I know this birthday boy is dead and all that for August the 5th, but this guy is a legend in the world of U.S. hockey and all that. This man was the head coach of the famous Miracle on Ice in 1980 and even went to be an NHL coach and part of the French team for the 98 Olympics. And actually came back to coach the U.S. national team for the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City, which almost had another Miracle on Ice, if you will. He was inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2006 posthumously. He was a legend by the name of Herb Brooks, who was born August 5th, 1937 in St. Paul, Minnesota. He would play college hockey for the University of Minnesota squad in the late 50s. He was a member of the 1960 Olympic team. And, he was actually the last cut the week before the game started, and he was upset. 3 weeks later, Brooks was at home when the team won the gold at Squaw Valley. And his own father said, well, the coach made the right decision to leave you on the bench. But anyway, it was further motivation for Brooks, who was a self-driven person, and he drove himself huge. He would play 8 times for the U.S. national team from 1960 to 1970. He was part of the 64 and 68 Olympic teams, which the Americans didn't do so well in. He decided to be, after retiring as a player, to sell insurance. However, Lou Nanne, who was a player on the 68 U.S. squad with Brooks, found out that Brooks could be good and made him a coach, and brought him to be the freshman coach for the Minnesota Golden Gophers in 1970. But in 1972, he was hired to be the Golden Gophers' main coach, helping them win 3 NCAA titles. And 9 members of the 1979 squad that won the championship would be recruited for the 1980 Olympic team. The legendary coach, Jack Parker, actually declined to be the U.S. head coach for the Olympics. Of course, the U.S. still had to use amateurs and all that. Anyway, he could handpick his team, and he picked several Minnesota players alongside Wisconsin players and Boston University players. Brooks would stress peak condition to compete with the Soviets, saying that one of the best reasons why the Soviets were that good was because many of their opponents were exhausted by the third period. So anyway, they would have practices and drills to get into the best condition possible. And then they wanted ships to be no longer than 40 seconds. They would play 63 games pre-Olympics and all of that. They actually had a famous tie with Norway, and then Brooks ordered his team to bag skate. All that, despite the fact that the rink lights were turned off. Americans would lose famously in a tune-up game to the Soviets at Madison Square Garden 10-3. Anyway, the Americans were in tough shape and all that. The Americans would pull a massive tie against Sweden in the preliminary rounds. They were down 3-2, and then they came back to score the tying goal with 30 seconds left. After a few wins against lightweights and all that, the Americans looked pretty decent. They took care of Finland. No, they took care of the Czechs or something. Yeah, I think it was the Czechs. But anyway, the Americans were in the final 4. They were in the medal round with Finland, the Soviets, and I think the Czechs. Yeah, but of course, under the rules of the round robin for the medals, the U.S. and Czechs could not face each other because they already did. So that result carried over. So the Americans would have to play the Soviets and Finns no matter what happened. Of course, Herb Brooks would make his famous speech great moments come from great reputations or something like that. I don't know, but we'll get to the Brookisms and all that. He used a great speech to lift up the team before the third period against the Russians. The Russians already were in trouble because after giving up a tying goal with 1 second left, star goalie Vladislav Tretiak was replaced by Sergei Mikhailov and all that. But anyway, they were down in the third period, but then scored a pair of goals, and Ruziani scored the winning goal 4-3. Do you believe in miracles? Yes. However, Herb was unhappy because he reminded the team that if they lose to Finland, they would technically take silver or even bronze. So he pushed his team and they beat Finland to win the championship. Brooks would head to Switzerland to coach doubles. Unfortunately, the team had a poor record, and Brooks's rough practices were the cause of trouble. So he went back to the NHL and would coach the Rangers, becoming the first American-born coach in Rangers history to win 100 games. Unfortunately, the team was 7 games below 500 in the middle of January 1985, and he was replaced by Craig Patrick, who ironically was his assistant for the 1980 Olympic team. He tried to negotiate with the North Stars to be coached and go back to Minnesota, but he decided to become a national sales rep for Charleston's, a memorabilia manufacturer. Brooks was offered the chance to go to St. Cloud University, which was a defensive Division II school, and then wanted to be elevated to Division I. But anyway, he was convinced by another coach to take the position, even though he turned it down. And the state of Minnesota only had 2 Division I programs for hockey. So anyway, the team ended up winning 25 games and won the Division II. Went to the Division II championship for the first time, taking third place and all of that. He left the team after the season. Fortunately, though, St. Cloud would go up to Division I by 1989. Brooks went back to Minnesota to be the head coach of the North Stars on a 2-year deal. It was actually the last time a college coach was selected to coach an NHL team until Dave Haxel, who used to be North Dakota's coach, went to Philly in 2015. Unfortunately, they were the worst team in the league in 87 and 88, and they basically fired him. They missed the playoffs by 1 point. Well, that was a critical one because the Leafs beat the Red Wings on the final Saturday night season. The North Stars lost their game the next day, and the Leafs went to the playoffs. It actually worked out for the North Stars because they got the number 1 pick, and that was Mike Modano. So Brooks did get them the number 1 pick. Brooks would bounce around and then was hired in July 91 to coach Utica of the AHL, which were the Devils affiliation. He was announced as the new head coach of the Devils in June 1992, so he coached the Devils. He stressed the need for youth and speed to build a winner, but unfortunately, he would have battles with Claude Lemieux, and Herb Brooks called Lemieux cancer. They actually took third place in their division, went to the playoffs, but lost to the Penguins in 5. Brooks would resign from the Devils in May 1993, which actually was a blessing in disguise because Jacques Lemaire put his coaching system to the task and got the Devils to the conference finals in 94 and the Cup in 95. Brooks then became a scout for the Penguins, but was pegged to be head coach of the Penguins after Kevin Constantine couldn't do the job in the 1999-2000 season. Anyway, Brooks confronted a Colorado announcer about an Alex Gusarov hit. He was given a 2-game suspension for that. He was named to that, and then stepped down for the Penguins coaching job to be a scout again once Ivan Helinka was made head coach. Brooks could have coached the Rangers in 2002, but turned that down, becoming the director of player development of the Penguins, which he served until his death. Brooks would go back to the Olympics with France in the '98 Winter Olympics, and then the U.S. team in 2002 in Salt Lake City. Anyway, Brooks actually petitioned the NHL to cancel its All-Star game to get days for players to practice before the Olympics. The 2002 Americans shocked everyone and themselves by beating the Russians in the semifinals, making them go to the gold medal game against Canada. And every good American should know the final score is 5-2 for Canada. And the funny thing was, the U.S., when they beat Russia, it was 22 years to the day of Miracle on Ice. So they did it again. Brooks would be inducted to the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, the IIHF Hall of Fame, and then posthumously to the Hockey Hall of Fame. He had 2 children with Patty, his wife, and he died in a single car accident near Forest Lake, Minnesota, 6 days after his 66th birthday, 666, on August 11, 2003. It was like he fell asleep behind the wheel before the accident and was not wearing his seatbelt. If he was wearing a seatbelt, he would have survived. The next season, in 2004, Disney would release the famous movie called Miracle with Kurt Russell being Herb Brooks behind the bench. And it was a very good game and all that. Brooks was actually a consultant for the film, doing principal photography. But of course, there was a dedication to Brooks stating he never saw it, he lived it for the movie. Anyway, Lake Placid would announce that their arena in 2005 would be renamed the Herb Brooks Arena and all that. He had a lot of Brooksisms. You were born to be a player. You were meant to be here. This moment is yours. Write your own book instead of reading someone else's book about success. And I've always said that coaching is like being a king. It prepares you for absolutely nothing. So for Minnesota, they were 3-time national champions under his watch. That's why he was the head coach of the U.S. Olympic team in 1980, if you will. In the NHL with the Rangers, North Stars, Devils, and Penguins. With the Rangers, he spent 4 years with them. But with Minnesota, New Jersey, and Pitt, it was just one singular season. He got the Rangers to 3 playoff appearances, 82, 83, 84, but they would all be losses to the Islanders. Two in the division finals, or the quarterfinals, if you will. Of course, he had that 1988 season in which the North Stars did finish last in the NHL and got Modano in the draft. 93 Devils, the predecessor to those pesky Devils teams in the mid-90s, and Pittsburgh one season before losing to Philly. In that series, I saw Keith Primo with that famous goal in quintuple overtime. So he did what he did, and he was a great motivator. Great moments come from great opportunities. There, I finally said it perfectly. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.